Actions and Aspirations. On the panel, Mihai Popșoi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Moldova, Andrei Sebiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ukraine, Babe Braze, Minister of Foreign Affairs Latvia, the Honorable Minister Peter from Hungary, Hannah Knott, the Director of the Eurasia Non-Proliferation Program and at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies in the US, moderator D.B. Venkatesh Verma, former Ambassador of India to Russia.
Please.
Well, you see, that was the original solution, you see?
Apologies. Moderator, over to you.
Good afternoon, namaskar. This is the panel on the Peace Tableau, Actions and Aspirations. I am Venkatesh Varma. I'll be moderating this session. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has been a very prominent topic in the Raisina dialogue in previous years. Given the open nature of the Raisina dialogue, we've had all points of view. This has provided a platform for all points of view on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And I must say that the Raisina dialogue has been ahead of the curve sometimes. For instance, last year, in February 2024, a mention was made by one of the panelists here of an article written by a senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, who is today the Vice President of the United States of America. This year, too, we would like to be ahead of the curve, but the curve is becoming larger. It's expanding by pace, including, I guess, this evening when there will be a telephone conversation between President Trump and President Putin. Whatever it is, I think there is increased interest and emphasis and focus on the way forward. That is the reason why this panel is called the Peace Tableau. We will discuss in this panel what will be a durable peace settlement in Ukraine look like. Would it be enough to address proximate issues, or do we need to go into root causes? Who will do it? Will it be a direct negotiation between Russia and Ukraine, or it will be a negotiation embedded in a larger understanding between Russia and the United States? And what will Europe play? What will be the role of other countries? Who will make the compromises on the battlefield and in the negotiating table? Will political maps be redrawn along with the global realignments that are taking place? We wish to have an open and honest and a realistic discussion. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar very wisely told us it is good to deal with the world with what is rather than what if. And it is in that spirit we have gathered together an excellent and distinguished panel of speakers. Excellency Mihai Popșoi, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Moldova. Excellency Babe Braze, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. Excellency Andrei Sebiha, Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Excellency Peter Ziharto, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. And Dr. Hannah Knott of the James Martin Center in California, but she's based in Europe and looks after Eurasian security issues. Welcome to all of you. After the panel has spoken, we have an opportunity for some questions from the floor, and I will give an opportunity for all the panelists to speak again, to responding to the questions as well as making some closing remarks. Since Ukraine is so much in the news, may I turn to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister first and give him an opportunity to set out his views following President Zelensky's visit to Washington. There has been a renewed emphasis on the peace process. There is a temporary truce that Ukraine has agreed to. Excellency, what is the path forward? What are the constituent elements and factors of a permanent and durable peace settlement? As an independent sovereign country, you're entitled to your red lines. What are those red lines? And you may also wish to say whether you are in a position to maintain and sustain those red lines, given the nature of the battlefield and the overall diplomatic landscape that is changing. What, in your view, would be a settlement that is in the long-term interests of Ukraine? Are you looking at a peace of choice, or are you looking at a peace of necessity? Do you, and this is my last question to you, as a country, are you confident that going forward, your national security will be well protected when so much of your security today is in the hands of a number of foreign partners? Excellency, over to you.
Greetings to everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to participate in today's event. So let me start by quoting first woman who was Indian president of the General Assembly. The more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. So Ukraine is the country which is mostly interested in achieving peace, just, long-lasting, comprehensive. This war is not about Ukraine. That's why it is also global interest to achieve just, comprehensive, long-lasting peace. Yes, after Jeddah, we got another speed, new additional opportunities to end this war this year. And we are ready for this. We are not the obstacle to achieve peace. Let's see what will be the response from Russian side to settle ceasefire. Ukraine supported US proposal about ceasefire, temporary ceasefire for 30 days, because it is very important not to have this perception of frozen conflict. We are talking about ceasefire, which definitely make our peace efforts much more effective. And of course, we need confidence building measures. So once again, this meeting in Jeddah between Ukrainian and US delegations sped up the process. And if we are talking about Ukrainian side, we are ready to start to implement the outcomes of Jeddah meetings. We do really expect, and here we need joint efforts and joint support, strong international support. We do really expect from Russian side unconditional yes for ceasefire. You know that probably today, according to the public statements, we could expect telephone conversation between President Trump and President Putin. So we do really hope that we will get more clear situation after this conversation. Returning back to our position, and we shared with this position with our American friends, with our allies in Europe. So nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing about Europe without Europe. No compromises at the cost of Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty. No restrictions to our military capacities, and no third country has a right to block our will or our way to participate in any union, in any alliances. That's our principal positions. And of course, we will never recognize any part of territories occupied by Russians. I would like to remind that at this stage, under Russia occupation, approximately about 20% of our territories. And also it is truth that Russia didn't manage to achieve any strategic goal in Ukraine. They didn't achieve any strategic goal. Yes, they have now some advances at the battlefield because of different reasons, but strategically, situation is under control. Our approach now is a time for diplomacy, for a strong diplomacy. We also do really believe that with the leadership of President Trump, we could achieve long-lasting, just peace. And it is crucial, it is really very important not to manipulate with this term, just long-lasting peace for Ukraine. And we count on the support of international community because it is about principles, it is about the respect of principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty, UN Charter, chapter, and about it is also about the restoration of world order based on rule of law.
Thank you. Excellency, let's turn to Moldova, which is a neighbor of Ukraine. It is a neighboring country to NATO. Apart from the destabilizing consequences of the Ukraine conflict, Moldova has its own set of issues relating to Transnistria. Looking at the ongoing conflict, Excellency, what is your approach to a durable peace settlement in Ukraine? How would it confine and gel with European security? And given Ukraine's own inability to join NATO, do you think that your policy of neutrality has served your interests well? Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. It is a wonderful gathering of people that care about peace, about stability. Moldova is a small country, a new country from the old continent, and of course, a country that is second most affected by the war in Ukraine other than Ukraine itself. We have tried, despite our modest resources, to provide all the support we can to our friends and neighbors, welcoming over 1 million refugees, providing access to labor, healthcare, because we know, and for us it's not at all abstract, that Ukraine is defending us as much as they're defending themselves. Moreover, Moldova is no stranger to challenges when it comes to its territorial integrity. The fact that we have struggled for over 30 years to have effective control over a sliver of land known as the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova that has denied Moldova the right to exercise its full sovereignty over its territory, we would not wish this to our worst enemy. When you have a frozen conflict on the territory, and that, of course, that hampers investments, then hampers the capacity of the country to fully exercise its sovereignty. But regardless of all those challenges, in the past 3 years since the full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine, Moldova has not only muddled through, but managed to achieve meaningful progress when it comes to our energy security, when it comes to our informational security. We're investing more in our defense capabilities. Yes, we are a neutral country. Yes, we have the bridge builder mentality, just like India. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we live in an environment where international law is respected where the Helsinki Act of 1975 is respected, it's not ideal, to say the least, that at the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Act, there are discussions about territorial concessions. Ukraine was able to prove to the whole world that it was able to stand up for itself, to stand up for the rule of law, for the international order. The fact that initially some had ideas that it can conquer Ukraine in 3 days, well, needless to say, that hasn't happened. And they're struggling to make sure that there is order in Kursk after 6 months. Ukraine has proven that it has the capacity to stand up for its territory and to stand up for international law. We in the Republic of Moldova, of course, support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and a long-lasting peace based on security guarantees. And the developments, most recent developments in Jeddah, are very much welcoming and encouraging. But it's very important to have robust mechanisms to ensure that the ceasefire is respected, that there are ways to make sure that Ukraine achieves the peace that all of us so much wait for. Because we have been so much affected across the world by the cost of living crisis, by the energy blackmail, and of course Moldova is no stranger to that. But at the end of the day, of course, any war is decided at the diplomatic table. And we encourage the efforts that the new administration in Washington, President Trump, the idea of peace through strength really resonates with us, because peace is what all of us need, and strength is the language that the Kremlin understands. We in the Republic of Moldova continue to do our fair share, despite our modest resources, to be a contributor to peace, to help our friends and neighbors in need, and we count on the international community on doing the same. Because if the rule of law and international law is not respected in one place, chances are it will not be respected in other places as well. And we are all in this boat together. And it's in the interest of every single one of our countries that international law prevails. Because otherwise, if we end up in a situation where might makes right, I don't want my children, and I don't wish to anybody's children, to live in a world where the powerful dictate and everybody else needs to bow down and listen. This is not an environment that we want to live in. And therefore, the fundamental rights and obligations enshrined in the UN Charter and in the Helsinki Act when it comes to Europe need to be respected, and we count on the efforts of the international community on standing up by the values that we all share. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. That was indeed a very powerful statement in favor of international law. Turning to Latvia, Excellency, along with other Baltic countries, Latvia has taken a very outspoken and upfront position on the Ukraine crisis. But Ukraine is not the only issue on your security agenda. Recent developments in the Baltic Sea area also have impacted on your own threat perceptions. NATO has expanded into Scandinavia, so you have a larger NATO coverage of your immediate periphery. But what is your perception of a way forward? How to reconcile Ukrainian security with European security in the new circumstances? But how is it that even with the expansion of NATO, the threat perception is only increasing in your part of the world? Is it just the threat of Russia, or is it the new fear of abandonment by America? What is your view?
Thank you so much. I think the answer to that is not one-dimensional. The Baltic states are 107-year-old democracies, and So we take a long view at any type of situations that arises with regard to our security. 50 years of those 107, we were illegally occupied by the Soviet Union. And that occupation was never recognized by the international community. So we regained independence in 1990. And that resistance movement is very much inspired by Gandhi's peaceful resistance. And they literally took, bits and pieces from those learnings and applied them in the Baltic states to make sure that we reestablish our independence, our democratic institutions, and return to international community as independent democracies again. So thank you to all those US, UK, all the countries who never recognized that occupation. So today, the peace can be very different. If I'm right, between Russia and Japan, there is still no formal peace. But there is peace. That is also a possibility. There is also a possibility that it affects everyone's sovereignty, whatever the settlement is. So if somebody thinks that Ukraine won't have an agency, what affairs it wants to decide by itself, I think those people are very mistaken. I don't think there is any country in the world who would like their affairs to be decided by another country, or who would like to be invaded by another country. So it will ultimately be up to all of us recognizing that as independent countries, we do want to decide our own future. And the way, whether we join ASEAN, whether we join Council of Europe, whether we join EU and NATO, and then it will be up to those members in those organizations to decide whether they are ready to admit one or another country. And that is why also for NATO, it has been a very important few years, because NATO is the organization that is based on Article 51 of the UN Charter. That is the right for individual or collective self-defense against an armed attack. And it's NATO that has guaranteed peace and security for the Euro-Atlantic community for more than 75 years. And what Ukraine is doing is defending herself exactly on the basis of that same article, Article 51 of the UN Charter. It's a self-defense based on international law. And that is why so many countries, people, communities have felt very comfortable supporting Ukraine. It was not because Ukraine decided to do something against Russia. No, it has a sovereign right to decide its own affairs, and nobody has the right to invade somebody else. That's why during the Peace Summit in Switzerland last summer, I was sitting next to a president of a big African country who said very clearly, if we start violating each other's borders, and if we accept the situation of Russia's aggression, then what will happen in Africa will be next. No respect for borders, everything up in flames. And again, I'm just quoting that I was told, but in that respect, what the UN Charter has provided to us is a framework that we need to respect. We need to respect each other's differences, but also the sovereignty, the way we decide that, yes, it's up to Ukraine to make sure they decide their future. They people decide what country they want. So it will, whatever the peace settlement, it will have the effect, I think, beyond Europe on a global level.
Thank you. Hungary, Excellency, has had a unique position on the Ukraine conflict, within the EU more specifically. Your president has plowed a lonely furrow sometimes, despite considerable criticism within the EU. with President Trump's emphasis on peace, an objective that has considerable international support, I must say. It appears that Hungary is more comfortable in global capitals than in your own region. You perhaps feel vindicated somewhat, but I want you to reflect on the elements of a durable peace settlement on Ukraine, and specifically whether it can come about without the consent and active support of Russia and the United States, number one. Number two, we would also like your assessment of this proposal of the so-called like-minded group of European countries which are in NATO but not part of NATO, in EU but not part of EU, who are planning to deploy some peacekeeping forces in Ukraine, backstopped by the United States. It's not clear what backstopped by the United States means at the present moment. As a NATO member, would Hungary support the use of NATO assets for these operations? Over to you.
First of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to the organizers to invite me again. Thank you, Jai, for hosting us here in wonderful Delhi, and I was very happy to listen to the Director General of the Hungarian Institute for Foreign Affairs just before this panel, announcing a wide-ranging cooperation among the organizers of the Raisina dialogue and the Hungarian Institute for Foreign Affairs. We are very happy to witness that. Well, you say that we are more popular outside of Europe than in Europe. You're right. But if you say no to war, no to migration, and no to gender propaganda, then this is your destiny. No war, no migration, no gender has been the essence of our strategy for the last 15 years. Why I say 15? Because we have been in office for 15 years now, winning 4 consecutive elections with 2/3 majority, which shows that it makes sense to perform up to the expectation of your electorate. And I have to tell you that this situation that we are more popular outside of Europe than Europe is partly caused by the fact that we used to be Trump well before Trump as well. So our political strategy aiming at stopping illegal migration, saying no to the aggressive gender propaganda, to understand that a human being can either be a man or a woman, and especially opting for peace from the very beginning of this tragic war in our neighborhood has put us in a situation in Europe where we had to be confronted with political and financial attacks continuously. I might even say that if you carry out a conservative, patriotic, right-wing political strategy with success, it cannot be digested by the liberal mainstream. And liberal mainstream does definitely rule still in Brussels, unlike in Washington for the last couple weeks or months. When it comes to this tragic war in our neighborhood, our position has always been the same as it is now. 2 or 3 days after this war had been launched, I called Foreign Minister Lavrov, and I called the head of the Ukrainian presidential administration, Mr. Yermak, and I told them, look, if you want to agree on conditions to peace, which we would really love to see you do so, Hungary is at your disposal. Come whenever you want to. We offer you fair circumstances, safe, comfortable, level playing fields. And I do hope that once you will take advantage of this offer and once you will negotiate about peace. We are the only country in NATO which did not deliver weapons to Ukraine. We are a country which has been carrying out its largest humanitarian operation ever since this war has been started, receiving 1.4 million refugees in Hungary, in a country with less than 10 million inhabitants. Being the #1 import source of Ukraine for electricity last year and this year as well, and being the #1 gas source for Ukraine in February. But we have been under continuous attacks, political and financial, for the last 3 years because of this position of ours. Our position was always that we need peace, we need a ceasefire, and we need peace negotiations. My Prime Minister has launched a peace mission during our presidency of the European Union last year. You might have realized that. Visiting Kiev, Moscow, Beijing, and meeting that time presidential candidate Donald Trump in Florida. After this, he has submitted a report to the European Council, putting forward a proposal for ceasefire and peace talks to be started. You cannot imagine the range and intensity of political attacks we have received for this position of ours. Though I have to tell you, I'm happy that nowadays we speak about ceasefire in a positive context. And I hope ceasefire would come. If those who have attacked us at that time had supported ceasefire at that time as well, much less people would have been killed, much less destruction would have taken place, and less Ukrainian territories would be under occupation currently. I wish European community had supported ceasefire at that time as well, instead of attacking us. We have always represented the position that a US-Russia agreement must be made in order to have a more peaceful future in Europe. And we are very happy that these talks have been started. We were happy to see the talks in Saudi Arabia between US and Russia, between US and Ukraine. And we do attach great hopes to these meetings, and we do hope that a ceasefire can be established as soon as possible and peace negotiations could be started as soon as possible. Because we want peace to come back to Central Europe. We have been living in the shadow and the neighborhood of this war. We have been confronted with the consequences pretty thoroughly. And we know that the Central European region and entire Europe needs peace to come back. And I hope that with President Trump being elected in the US, with President Trump being committed to peace, in a couple of weeks we can celebrate peace returning to Central Europe.
Thank you, Excellency. Turning to a broader vision of European security, Dr. Naughton. You are based in Europe. You have a ringside view of what is happening. I would request you to zoom up a bit and see the current status of the transatlantic relationship between Europe and the United States. What are the reasons for a range of responses in Europe, ranging from panic to outrage? Please comment on Europe's own relationship with Russia, whether this objective of permanent hostility with Russia is sustainable in the long run, particularly given the fact that the United States is talking with Russia, not just on Europe, not just on Ukraine. The second point I would wish you to focus on is the impact on the more intangible dimensions of European security, which is nuclear sharing within NATO, the French offer for an extended deterrence outside the NATO framework, the impact on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or further proliferation in Europe, etc. But lastly, I would also like to, for this audience, which is a global audience, how is orphaned Europe, which is in permanent hostility with Russia and a certain sense of great disquiet with the United States of America, how will it affect Europe's role globally in this part of the world, India, China, the Indo-Pacific? Would it diminish Europe's role or would it enhance it? And the perception here is that while there are calls for peace from different parts of the world, Europe still persists with Europe is no longer a project of peace. Europe is today a project of war, especially given the remilitarization plans that are taking place. Are remilitarization plans real, or are they more hat than cattle? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the hosts for inviting me. It's a great honor to join such a distinguished panel. Indeed, I'm the only non-official, the only analyst on this panel, so I can speak only for myself. I'm based in Berlin. I work mostly on Russia, on nuclear issues, so allow me to zoom out a little bit from the most pressing priority, which is Ukraine, to address these issues related to European security. And I think in Europe, we should start the conversation with two very basic assumptions. The first assumption is that Russia has not fundamentally revised the goals with which it entered the war against Ukraine 3 years ago. It wants a permanently neutered Ukraine, unable to rearm itself, but also a rollback of NATO from Central and Eastern Europe. It's very clear that these Russian demands have not gone away. The second fundamental assumption that I would propose is that we are now in Europe faced with a US administration which fundamentally wants burden shifting towards Europe, not burden sharing. Not just when it comes to support for Ukraine, but also when it comes to thinking about European security more broadly. And I would propose that in these circumstances, Europe has to rethink deterrence, escalation management vis-à-vis Russia, across the whole spectrum, from the hybrid through the conventional to the nuclear. When it comes to hybrid measures, we have woken up to this threat in Europe over the last few years. A lot is happening to address it, but I would submit that, whereas the Russian strategic community has thought about escalation management in a very holistic fashion for a long time and has viewed hybrid measures very much as part of that, we have not really cultivated the same mindset, the same concepts, the same vocabulary even to talk about these things in Europe. So there's some catching up to do. On the conventional side, a lot is happening in Europe, far too much to be talking about on this panel. Different European countries are continuing to step up. I believe that the Bundestag in Berlin is convening actually today to pass a decision on loosening the borrowing rules to make available significant funds for investment in infrastructure and the military. But let me mostly come to the nuclear factor here. I think notwithstanding the occasional nuclear abolitionist rhetoric by President Trump, it is not clear to me that this US administration has a clear agenda for arms control. And I would propose that we'll be lucky if in a year from now, we'll be sitting here, and this will be when the New START treaty will have expired in February of next year. We'll be lucky if we will have gotten to an agreement between the United States and Russia in which they pledge to not exceed the limits of New START, to continue to abide by the current limits. But I don't think we will see big strides on nuclear arms control over the next year. That means for us in Europe, we will continue to face a Russia which has a very versatile and large arsenal of theater-range nuclear weapons, and the intent for nuclear coercion vis-à-vis Europe, precisely at a time when we are increasingly nervous about the durability and the credibility of US extended deterrence in Europe. And that is why you see renewed calls for a Europeanized nuclear deterrent. You see what I believe are very necessary discussions of what that would actually entail, institutionally, legally, logistically, for other European countries, for instance, to rely on the French nuclear deterrent. There's a lot of scaremongering and panic and mythology in the public debate surrounding this. So I think there's a lot of room for responsible communication and for education on this matter. Now, as the Europeans address this spectrum of issues, of challenges, I just want to suggest that there are three trade-offs or tensions that Europe will have to deal with. And the first I would call the tension between Plan A and Plan B. The question is, if we are seriously pursuing Plan B, which is substituting what the United States does in Europe, are we inadvertently undermining Plan A, which is to make sure that the US remains committed, which I would submit, especially when it comes to nuclear deterrence, is quite essential. I would imagine that that risk or that tension between Plan A and Plan B depends on the specific policy issue, and it'll require delicate case-by-case diplomacy vis-à-vis the United States. The second tension is that between effective leadership versus unity in Europe. If it is increasingly the case that coalitions of the willing take the lead when it comes to supporting Ukraine or other issues, are we inadvertently hastening the fragmentation of Europe into zones of security, thereby effectively furthering the very objective that Russia is pursuing vis-à-vis Europe? And the third issue is that between deterrence and arms control. Now, as you know, arms control has become almost a frivolous term in Europe over the last few years. Of course, it is hard to see the war in Ukraine ending without some form of arms control, encompassing Ukraine, but also going broader. We will be in a continuous adversarial relationship with Russia in Europe. So there will be areas of tension. If you want to regulate those tensions, there's a huge toolbox from the past to turn to. Ideas of notifications, ceilings, buffer zones, if we go to the Vienna Treaty or the Vienna document or the CFE Treaty. Of course, that will have to be updated for new realities, new capabilities. The problem will not be the toolbox or the ideas. It will be a massive trust deficit vis-à-vis Russia, because I would submit that countries, certainly in the Baltic region and in Eastern Europe, will not believe for a very long time that Russia will not pose a threat to them. But we need to, I think, to the extent that it is possible, try to stabilize this adversarial relationship with Russia. So these tensions have no clear answers today. But because so much remains in flux also when it comes to the US conventional and nuclear commitment to Europe, but I think they should shape the conversation in Europe beyond the most pressing issue, which remains Ukraine.
Thank you. We've had some excellent points of view passionately put forward, very substantive. I will now open the floor for a few questions. Please identify yourself, keep it short. We will get a mic to you. We will collect at least 3 questions, and I will then turn to the panel for them to answer. And if we have more time, we'll take more questions. Otherwise, I will ask the panel to make some closing remarks.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Seiko. We are from a private equity firm from New York. My question is to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs from Ukraine. Ukraine holds about $12 to $15 trillion in mineral wealth, which includes REEs, which are about $4 trillion, which are critical for industries like defense, AI, semiconductors, and EVs. Your economy is already, crashed about 30%. You still have liabilities of about $424 billion. So if you unlock your REE in the whole value chain, you would additionally add about $1 trillion to your GDP and expand your economy 10 to 15 times. So going back, President Trump's art of deal, he's trying to leverage your resources. So why wouldn't Ukraine consider collateralizing its own resources and drive its industrialization and economic sovereignty?
Yeah, thank you. From the fellows, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Foreign Ministers, first of all, for explaining why Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine concerns us all. And my question is, to what extent does Russia really is willing to negotiate? Like, does it really want a peace it claims? And the second question, if I may, how do we prevent individual EU member states from being played off against each other and ensure the necessary unity that would also secure us as Europe a seat at the negotiation table? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more question.
Here, sitting, Christopher Arcuri from Italy. My question is about 2014. Why didn't the international community and the EU react like they are reacting right now in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and the support for the separatists in eastern Ukraine? Would the thing go differently? Could the war be avoided at this point? And my second question is regarding the use and the manipulation of Putin of Russian-speaking population in some countries. Are Latvia and Moldova concerned about this? Thank you.
Thank you. Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, since a number of questions were addressed to you, maybe it's fair to give you a chance to first respond. Please go ahead.
So about Ukrainian mineral resources and our possible agreement with the United States, we are ready to sign such type of an agreement. We are open. We conducted several rounds of negotiations, and the framework agreement is ready for signature. By the way, in Jeddah, we proposed American side to sign this agreement. We do really need a serious presence of American business in Ukraine. So it is mutually beneficial, and we do really hope that we will proceed on this direction. Also, I would like to answer to another question from Germany journalist with regard of Russian conditions. So you see, I remember very well first approach of Russian side immediately after this brutal Russian aggression started. It was not a proposal. It was a demand to capitulate. It was the language of ultimatums. Unfortunately, they didn't change this approach. They do not want to recognize Ukraine as an independent state. They want to ruin our statehood. So this proposal of full ceasefire is a real global test for Russia to demonstrate who really wants peace and who really wants to continue this war. Russia wants to continue this war.
Since we don't have any further questions, I'll give the panel
May I?
one more.
May I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
May I answer something? Excuse me?
Yeah, I'll give you a chance. Please go ahead.
On whether we are seeing that Russia wants peace. No, there is not a single indicator currently that Russia wants peace. When we look at all the alignments of politics, religion, media, private sector, anything that is there, it's all about pro-war. So it might change, but currently there is no change. Whether there's anybody else who doesn't want peace, I don't know. I think we all want peace, this for sure. And that peace, again, has to be such that it doesn't leave negative effect, whether it's on Asia or Europe or elsewhere. And those details were explained, I think, by Ukraine's foreign minister very well. And as for various parts of population, you know, our Indian population is growing by 2,000 a year, which is nice, I think. And we have a population from Eastern Ukraine. At some moment, 1/10 of our population was from Eastern Ukraine. We have my colleague, one of the best friends in the cabinet, is a naturalized Lebanese doctor, and so on and so forth. So Latvian population is very varied, and we are all Latvians. We are all under our constitution equal. So we don't divide people in groups, and that's why, you know, when somebody asks me whether Russia could present a threat to our populations, I don't think so. I don't see parts of population willing to move to Russia for understandable reasons. And in that respect, no, we are fine. We want more engineers. We need more people from STEM backgrounds. As the whole defense investments that we are doing, we are moving towards 5% for defense of GDP, requires quite a bit of industrial capacity in Latvia. The drone industry and elsewhere, we are doing very well. So come, engineers from India. We need you.
Yeah, since we are running out of time, I'd like to give the other panelists time for some closing remarks. The Foreign Minister of Moldova, please. So go ahead.
Thank you. Since Moldova was mentioned, I would like to say that in light of the referendum that Moldovans have voted in a few months ago, we see our future firmly in the European Union as a guarantee of our security and prosperity going forward. And as an EU candidate country, I may not be best positioned to speak about EU's future, but I can assure you that in light of the security challenges that we are facing, honest people can disagree about the extent to which Russia poses a threat. But what is undeniable is that if you want peace and security, you need to build a significant deterrence. And that is what the European Union is doing. European Union GDP is 10 times, or depending how you count, 15 times larger than that of Russia. It may have some coordination problems, let's be honest about that, but the fact that EU's capabilities are tremendously over that of Russia is undeniable. They are economically on par with the United States and China, and India is very much catching up. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Foreign Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, and the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, for being the guardians of global stability and peace, and the fact that at the height of cyber rattling by the Kremlin, India made sure to contribute and helping that situation doesn't get out of hand and the red lines are not crossed, because nuclear stability is in everybody's interest. And the fact that India has been playing a significant role in ensuring global stability is certainly commendable. And on behalf of the Republic of Moldova, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. And we very much welcome our Indian friends to visit the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you. Foreign Minister of Hungary, sir, you want to make some closing remarks?
Well, thank you so much once again for including me as well into this panel. We do hope that with the Western world receiving a new leader, common sense, rationality, normality, and mutual respect will return to international politics. In recent years, hypocrisy, judging, lecturing each other, and especially those who did not belong to the mainstream, was overruling the international political landscape. And such a phenomenon can end up in tragic consequences. Therefore, we do hope that from now on, the international relations will be based on mutual respect. And if this is the case, then we have a hope for a brighter future. There were too many attempts recently aiming at interfering into domestic issues of other countries, like in our case. During the last parliament elections in Hungary, tens of millions of dollars have been invested in order to support our opposition, which is now screaming for President Trump's decision to cut the USAID sources. So if mutual respect can return and replace judging, lecturing, and cornering each other, then we might have a better hope for a more peaceful future on the international political scene. We hope that this is going to be the case.
Thank you. Hannah?
I mean, I'll just say very briefly that I think it is dangerous to view Russia's engagement with the Trump administration as indicative for a desire for peace. I think entering this process is attractive for Russia because the process itself affords it certain benefits. Normalizing relations with the United States further dispels what has long been, I think, a myth, which is that Russia is internationally isolated. But it also affords Russia another opportunity to drive a wedge between transatlantic unity. If we in Europe want to stand firm vis-à-vis Russia, we need to make Russia believe that the costs of posing further threats to us outweigh the benefits. So there's no substitute for investing in deterrence and defense, which is becoming a tall order given where the US administration is going, but it remains true today.
Thank you. This has been a remarkable session on a very difficult issue. Conflicts have no easy solutions, but conflict resolution has one necessary and unavoidable starting point, which is the negotiating table. I think the message that has come out from the panel and from the discussion reinforced this. There's a point that has been stated by Prime Minister Modi right from the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for their participation and answering the questions raised with clarity and purpose. Thank you all. This session comes to an end.
Thank you so much. We are running a bit over time. Lunch is now open. We have some lunch conversations at Shah Jahan. There is Uninterrupted Peaks, which is a hall right across from this one. Uninterrupted Peaks, Rethinking Energy, Access, Affordability, and Security. If I could request the